Welcome to the Teachers Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode with the directors of Garner Holt's Education Through Imagination, using innovation, creativity, and technology, please go back and check it out. We're so excited. We have two guests today. Jennifer Schoen has over 30 years of experience in education. She's passionate about helping first-generation college students get into and graduate from college. She's the director of the Opportunity Scholarship and Outreach Office at the Northeastern University in Boston. Gina Christ has over 35 years of experience in education, including working as an admission financial aid counselor and Letitia, a K-12 school counselor. She is the co-director of Rise Together. She trains University of Virginia students to craft and implement youth programming that supports the academic and SEL needs of diverse K-12 students. Get ready to take some good notes on keys to college and supporting our first generation students. Welcome, Jen and Gina.
That was a mouthful.
It was a mouthful. And you know what? As I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, just between the two of you, over 65 years of education experience right there. So that's amazing. We are so happy to have you here on the Teachers of Pep Rally. And we can't wait to hear, because we've been talking to you, that passion really kind of come through the speakers to all our friends out there and hear what you're doing. So welcome. And let's first start out. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. Jen, where do you think your passion for helping people get into college comes from?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about that, and I was all set to kind of go thinking of law school and things like that when I was in college. And then I got this terrible knee injury from playing field hockey and lacrosse. And so I pivoted and I got really active in student government. And then I got to see sort of behind the curtains of how college worked and got to know like the chancellor and the provost and the president and got to be in on some of the things that were going on. And I was like, I really love this. This is amazing. So I'm going to go into education. And it just so happened that I started in admissions and then wanted to get to know students more. So went on and got my degree in higher ed and student affairs, and then just really wanted to serve students. And then I started to realize that it wasn't equal. There were so many students who didn't have access to education, didn't have access to understanding how to get into college. And so then my career led to specifically working with first generation college students and students from low income backgrounds. And I've been doing that for just specifically the past 20 years. And it's been amazing. And I have learned so much from working with that group of students. So I love it.
Oh, we can't wait to dig into that journey. Gina, why don't you tell us where your passion comes from?
Mine is a little bit different. And just to say up front, Jen and I were college roommates. And so way back in the day, Jen influenced me. And that's a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. But I came from a very different background. My parents did not go to college. They had us when they were very, very young. And we kind of raised each other. And my two brothers were big athletes. And I was only known as Little Didio. That was my name, Little Didio. No one even knew my first name because I was their sister. And I ended up going to the same college that they went to, which is the same college Jen went to, and we were all there together. So I did an internship in the Office of Admissions. At some point, I finally was able to branch out a little bit and push myself. And there was a wonderful director of admissions at the school. And I was able to say to him, thank you for letting me in just because I was Little Didio. And I did not feel as though I was worthy of being accepted to this school on my own. And he took out my application from the archives and was able to show me all the notes that they had about me in my application that I always thought I was just a charity case, more or less, getting in. So that's what inspired me. And I said, well, if I felt that way, surely there are lots of other people that feel the same way. And that's kind of the audience that I always directed my career towards.
Amazing.
I know what these I was like,
It's the truth.
Air hugs all night. I feel it. I feel it. Thank you for sharing. That was very
and it's
powerful.
interesting, before we got on tonight, I had started looking, I was like, I'm interested to see what the statistics are for how many of our college students are considered first generation. And it's around 50%. It's around 50%. And that got me thinking on the drive home today about my family. And if I think about it, my dad was first generation. He went to the Naval Academy. His parent, his dad fought in the war. So he pretty much went off to war, came back. And then I would assume from, the vet bill, he probably was able to get a job and he became a cop, and that was it. Like my family's totally blue collar. So I have probably surpassed everyone on both sides of my family as far as college and degrees, which is it just seems amazing. So the service that you all are doing is just so special. And I really hope that we're going to dive in here and really utilize your experience and your tips to help us all out.
Yeah, Jen and Gina, Aaron, just to follow that, I teach in higher ed. I taught a first year seminar course last term in the fall, 24 students, 20 of the 24 are first generation. So I thought by now, having taught as long as I did, that we had cycled through that. And and so I'm in the Pennsylvania Northeast, that well runs very deep. I'm going to be very curious to see where you're going to take us tonight, because it's something that's not a flash in the pan thing, that's for sure.
No, and from what I've been reading, it's only going to grow. The number of first generation students. I mean, in admissions, we talk about the demographic cliff, which is basically the number of, 18-year-olds are going to get lower and lower coming up.
Yes, 2025, we call it.
Right.
That's that's the crush that's coming. Yeah.
But if you look at first generation students, that number is constantly growing. And, if you're at a public school, you're probably seeing a lot more than you are maybe at a Northeastern and a private schools.
So this makes me want to ask Gina, because Gina, I think you are supporting a team of mentors to help. Can you give us a little bit of information about that? Because that seems like a really smart thing that even maybe some of our high schools or K through 12, or even where Fred is, could do if they don't already have something like your program.
Right. What we do is use first generation college students. And my big passion is to increase the retention rate. And it's not good enough that we're quote unquote getting first generation students to college. We've got to do a much better job of meeting their social and emotional needs so that they can stay in college and graduate. And that's something that is at the heart of Rise Together and what we do. So when we have programming, we have mentors from University of Virginia. We also have mentors from Northeastern University. They're working side by side now for the first time. And I'm helping them as much as we're helping the high school students on their journey to college.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the beautiful thing that Gina does with the mentors is she helps them realize the incredible experience and knowledge that they have, and then lets them use that to help the students coming up in the high school. And it's really transformational, both for the students who are mentors as well as the students in the high schools. And whether they choose like one of our colleges like UVA or Northeastern doesn't matter. But if they start to think about college and see people who are like them going on to college, it's such an incredible program, and it has such great success.
Gina, so I want to know too, it sounds like you're able to take what your journey was and allow that to be something as an example or something that drives you. Because what I heard is that when you're pairing them with these mentors, it's to let them see the students to see the value in themselves. And a little bit of your introduction story of your passion, it sounds like that happened to you. And so you want to make sure that there's a platform for other kids, young adults, or even adults to have that. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And it also it's empowering. They don't see their value. A large number of the students have the imposter syndrome, which we talk so much about. And that's very, very real. And it affects me, right? It affects everybody. And this program is able to get at the heart and soul of that imposter syndrome by having them see the benefit of their work. And we build in surveys and outcomes so they can actually quantify the progress that they're making. And that way it's not, wow, you're doing a great job. It's not just that, it's look at the work that you're doing, and they can see it in black and white, which with my origin story, I needed to see it, to physically see the comments. I provide that same experience for the students that we work with.
Gina, I have a question. Maybe this is getting a little bit ahead, but what's your recruitment process for those peer mentors?
They recruit. So I don't recruit mentors. It's by word of mouth. We go through the athletic office, we go to the dean of students, office of admissions, cultural affairs, right? Jen's program, any program at this school that has the need for mentors. Many times it's students that have a service requirement for their scholarship. And so we'll provide that service for them. And that's where we're getting our mentors from, just through networking within the school and embracing students from all majors, all backgrounds.
I love that. I love hearing that. That's a great internal promotion. Has COVID at all slowed it down with this past year or two?
That's a great question. COVID has opened the doors wide open for us. It was that we were limited by transportation and the ability to physically gather the mentors, bring them to the schools. That takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. With COVID, we're able to reach students across the country. And now our mentors work with, one example is we worked with a student from Florida who lived in Miami. I'm in Charlottesville. We worked with a student in Miami. The student ended up being one of Jen's students in Boston. So cool. COVID has really helped. It's opened up the pathway for us.
That's awesome.
Wow. So I've been just waiting to jump in. I didn't realize how personal this having you ladies on tonight was going to be for me. I relate so much to Gina's story. My mom was first gen, but she was first gen as an adult after having teenage kids. So I kind of felt and feel like I'm first gen because it was kind of so late in the game for her. And I just remember my own experience. I literally had to fill everything out on my own, had no idea what FAFSA, what Pell, what grants were. I mean, totally blind. And so it took a couple of tries for me to finish, because the first go round was horrible. I just was not prepared mentally, emotionally for the demands of college. And then not to see it around me, you know, it was kind of like, I mean, an extreme culture shock. So I'm so relating to your students and grateful for your work. I guess now as a therapist, I'm dealing with first gens that are experiencing tremendous stress and anxiety about this whole process. I have a 10th grader now that's dealing with anxiety about college. So I'm very curious, ladies, and Gina, this is probably more of a question for you. How are you all supporting that social and emotional side?
It's a huge part of what we do. And we dedicate this session. We have 20 minutes that just focuses on the social and emotional piece. And then we have the college guidance piece. And then we actually have the students create their own service project. So they are leaders in the community and they can learn firsthand what it feels like to have a positive impact on the community. But dedicating that time at first is very difficult because they don't want to talk about, those vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
And you have to literally have a stubborn match with them as far as waiting and waiting for them to let you in the door. But that's the key to everything. And they know that we're not going to back off on that piece. And then eventually they start to embrace their fear, their anxiety, no safety net. I mean, man, what a risk. It's easy to take a risk if you know you fall into a big safety net. But for many of these students, if they don't reach their dreams, their goals, that there's really not much. It's like a large difference for them between success and not success. So yeah, we just build that into everything and understand the resistance and be patient with that.
Awesome.
So it sounds like there's a big piece where you have to help build up confidence. And then there's another piece, and Letitia kind of said that too, of maybe the culture shock of not really understanding what you need to do, maybe even feeling overwhelmed, right? With I've decided, okay, I'm going to try to apply to college, but what do I do? And so Jen, I think that's kind of where you come in. I'm curious, I want to look at two parts. One, the SAT, ACT section, because I think you've got some unique things that you do for that. And then the other side of it with Gina and Jen, then let's talk about writing, my favorite. So Jen, tell us a little bit about the SAT, ACT. Kids are worried about their score. Are there other alternative things they can do?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and a positive, if you can say there's a positive of COVID, it's that a lot of schools went to test optional, which I think is a great benefit to first generation college students. I think it's a benefit to all students, but I think especially to first gen and low income students, because it's one less thing they have to pay for, because if it's not, they all don't know that they can get a waiver and they can ask for those things. And so they're like, they only take it once, whereas more affluent people may take it 4 or 5 times, and then it's skewed. But the biggest thing so I run a scholarship program called the Torch program at Northeastern, and we devalue isn't the right word, but we look at SATs if we happen to be taking them, but in general, they're way low on the list because we value, first of all, the 4 years that students have put into high school and the courses that they've taken and the grades that they get versus like 3 hours of sitting and taking a test. But we look at, fancy words, non-cognitive variables, but we look at things like, do the students know how to ask for support? Like, is there evidence of that in their teacher recommendation, in their counselor recommendation, in their essay, in their activities list? We look for their leadership, which we define really broadly, and we weight that very heavily. So that could be they have a job and they've been promoted in that job. They have a job because they're helping support their family. They're a translator for their family because their parents don't speak English. They're a caregiver for their siblings because maybe they're with a single mom who works, 100 hours a week trying to support the family. And so we really value those things much more than we do any of the standardized test scores. And currently, the past 2 years, we don't even look at the standardized test scores. And fingers crossed that that will be something that will continue to hold true, because I don't think we need them to really evaluate the students. And as Gina said, the strengths that they bring, they come in and they just don't know their own potential, and they wonder how they get selected for this scholarship. And they're like, why me? And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Like, you did all these things, and you have such determination and ambition and drive and grit, and you're going to be incredibly successful with the support that we offer. And then you just sort of get out of the way once they realize, like, oh my gosh, I can do this.
I love it. Gina, that part when you're doing because you said you did the social and emotional, and then the mentors also help with the college process. Is that applying, or is that primarily they're in college, so now you're kind of helping them with what it means to be a college student?
No, we help with the entire application and financial aid process. We help them with scholarship searches, scholarship applications, QuestBridge, which is a very difficult application. We help them with the QuestBridge application. Posse Scholars, or in Jen's case, Northeastern, the Torch program has additional essays that have to be written. So we help them with all aspects of the application process, as well as financial aid and scholarship.
And then so that was the lead in, and then there's also the scholarship opportunities after admission too. Do you kind of swing back around and can continue to help them by your group?
Yes, we do. What it is we work on the semester. So we work with students during the fall, during the spring, and the summer. And the summer is where we really help with the nitty-gritty of applications. We have a lot of guest speakers too, come in from universities, so that students can hear firsthand what an admissions counselor is looking for and how to improve their essays and their applications, their financial aid applications. So we stick with a student from junior year straight through till about this time, senior year. And by that time, they're good to go. And then in Charlottesville, we will work with the seniors again in April and May to make sure they're picking the right courses, that they have the right dorms, they're set with their roommate, and they have all the items they need to go to college.
But then once they do get admitted, though, you're still there, kind of like weaving them in through the program. It doesn't just end at the admission gate. And it's
No. Yeah,
nice.
and a number of them become mentors, which to me is the most exciting thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like an extended family, like you guys become the extended family. I love it. I love it. And you know, I'm wearing Tuskegee University in honor of Black History Month, and that this is where my husband graduated from. And we were kind of having this conversation, and he didn't have anything like this. He's first gen. But I think being around people that looked like him was a comfort, and added maybe a support that he did not realize he needed or even had there. Do you find that to be the case with many of your first gen students? Just even the culture shock of being around people that don't look like them?
Well, I can say, you know, so for our program, so I work with about 200 students, and Northeastern, predominantly white institution, and my students are mostly BIPOC students and mostly low income because of the backgrounds that they come from, with both Boston and Torch, which is national. And you know, one of the things we try to do is say, like, this is your office, this is your home base, we can answer questions, but you're not our students, you know. Go and find your people, and then we talk to them about how you do that. And we do programming, you know, maybe with the African American Institute or with the Asian American Cultural Center, and we promote those to the students, so they, no matter who they are, they can find, you know, I like to say, find your people. And they get to define what their people, who their people are.
I love it.
But really having them go out and just in our office, you know, seeing and being in our office and sitting down with the other students, they see, like, oh, there are people like me. I'm not the only person of color on this campus, even though in my classroom, sometimes it might seem that way.
Absolutely. The hugs are getting bigger. The hugs are getting bigger.
Yeah.
Sorry, Pete.
No, this is bringing me back to a conversation, an email I got a few weeks ago. A former student of mine, I'm a music teacher, and a former student of mine is in this position right now, first gen, all these things. And definitely there is that imposter complex going on, not good enough, stress. And I'm thinking the benefits of you guys helping take the weight off of the writing and the financial aid, because students that are pursuing a more specialized program, maybe something in the arts where you have to prepare for an audition on top of everything else, or your portfolio on top. And that, from an artistic point of view, that has the most stress. They're putting their most selves in it. When you guys have that, say, hey, I'm here for you. I could help you with these other things, the nuts and bolts, which I know my side of the brain doesn't do that stuff very well. So beneficial. Excellent stuff.
Yeah, you know, it is, Pete, you raise a really good point. And so I've been teaching in higher ed for 22 years, and now I have, you know, a son and daughter as undergrads, and I'm confused by the process. Like, there's elements to it that have so much mystique. So as you were just talking about the changes in the SAT and the ACT values, and the, an evaluation for entrance. I just had that conversation with somebody the other day, and I had to go back and understand what we were doing internally. So, I mean, there's a bubble that exists. So yeah, as somebody new coming in, it is daunting. It is an incredibly complex process. So yeah, it's intimidating to that first generation. It's intimidating to every generation, I think. But it's great to see such a well-structured program that you both are part of. I'm impressed. I mean, because I'm part of some retention efforts, within my university, and I know you both reflect the attitudes and the energy that my people have. But the one thing is, it's such a needed and it's like social work in a way. It's like collegiate social work, and we don't do enough of it because it's that retention factor. That's what I would like to a little bit know more about, the retention side. How does this fit into retention, and how do faculty fit into your retention pieces?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So, I've done this I worked with a program called the Achievers Program at the University of Washington for 10 years. And it was just like me and 400 students and trying to connect them. And the key anywhere is relationships. And it's me in my office building relationships with all the people who want to get to know students and work with students and help students. And whether you're at a big school or a small school, like they're everywhere. So it's just, for me, it's finding them and then it's connecting the students. So I always think of it like a hub, like every place needs a hub for first generation students. Or for any student group, but especially for students who are maybe not typical at that institution. So at Northeastern, it might be first gen students, the hub. And so they have one place they can go to get their questions answered, but we don't have to be experts because we bring in the experts. So my scholarship advisor will say, you need to talk to, Dr. Engineering, because you want to be an engineer, but you don't really understand what that means.
Right.
So let's connect you so that you can talk about what does an engineer do? And, what are you going to have to study? And yes, you're going to have to take math and, all those kinds of things that they know, but they can hear it from an expert. And then they build that bond with that faculty member or the person in the financial aid office. And then they feel more comfortable going to answer those questions. And so relationships and connections, that's totally what it's all about. And, as again, Gina was saying that the one student who, she worked with in Rise Together, then ended up as a Torch Scholar. I met because I talked to the Rise Together group. So that was connection number one. And now, she's out here making connections with other students in the Boston area by serving them as a mentor. And it's all the connections. And if students have connections and feel like they belong, then retention just is great.
Yeah. And that's where that co-curricular piece comes into place too, right? Where they're getting involved in the clubs and the activities. Now they're going to succeed in the classroom. There's definitely that. We know that the data is out there that supports that. Yeah. Getting students to that point though, sometimes to get them to go beyond their comfort zone of the classroom to get involved, which means extra time, and then getting them involved as an officer in a club, and the student government. I loved your story about that. That's so cool, because I know student government leaders that have come back over the years, and you see how it was such a fundamental accelerant for them to really propel their careers. They not only did they get their degree, they got to see how the university worked, but they got to see how their leadership skills can be honed. And then they came back and they kind of use that as a kind of not so well structured in your program, but as a mentoring aspect. So yeah, you're speaking great truths here. So I appreciate hearing it in a honed way. That's nice.
Thanks.
Are you curious about how your students are feeling? Despite our best efforts, it can really be hard to know how our young people are doing, especially now. WellCheck is here to help. WellCheck is a web-based app that allows students to complete a daily emotional check-in. In less than 1 minute, students are able to take inventory of their emotional state and communicate important information to their teachers. WellCheck actually flags students who may be in need of a little extra TLC so educators can proactively intervene before larger issues arise. The app allows schools to track individual and class level data daily as well as over time. To learn more about WellCheck, go to their website, www.wellcheck.com. That's www.wellcheck.com. You can also find them on Twitter at CheckWell. The goal of WellCheck is to give educators the information so they can do their best, and that is supporting students.
So we talked about the testing part, a little bit about the application part. Let's talk about my favorite part, the writing. Right? So ELA teacher, totally get it. And Jen and I, we sat outside one time and had lunch, and I think we talked about this for a long time. Sorry, Jen. I love the writing process, and I find it fun and challenging to help students try to find a love for writing their narrative. And it's not always easy, and that's okay. I get that writing doesn't come naturally. And then the other piece, like Gina, you had shared, I think it's partly just that confidence or not feeling like they, what we all see is valuable of them, of the part of them. Sometimes it's hard for us to see it in ourselves. I'm the same with that. So Jen, you've got a little trick that you do, I think, that we talked about. Do you tie it into a hero's journey? Am I remembering that right? Okay.
I think the hero's journey is just a great way to have students start to think about how they can tell that narrative. And it's basically, what, and it's really hard. It's trials and treasures and then transformation is how I think of it. And the trials can be anything that a student maybe has had a learning experience about. It doesn't have to be like a deep, traumatic thing. And it shouldn't be that, students should never sort of have to re-traumatize themselves by sharing that in an essay, but it can be something that they learned about themselves. And that was a hard lesson to learn, right? And it can be internal or external. But oftentimes students stop there. Like Gina was using a great Disney movie. What was the movie that you used to share that, Gina, in the class that we did together?
I can't remember, but I mean, it could be any Disney movie. And like Hercules, if Hercules stopped when he was awkward and stumbling, and then that's all he talked about, it wouldn't mean anything. It's what happens after he was a scrawny, awkward god. And that all Disney characters have that same thing. If you're going to stay in the tragedy of the character, you're never going to get to why we really admire those characters that Disney's able to portray.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. So that's the hard part. It's like, it's not just this was hard for me piece to write about. It's what did you get out? What treasures did you get from that? What, and then the transformations, how did that experience make you different? Like, why are you different now? Because you went through that experience. And it can be any experience that the student chooses to share. And if they start to think about it that way, it just makes for a very good story that I think resonates with admissions readers. Because it's so hard to write about ourselves. Like, I don't envy these students. I can sit down and like, hey, give us 650 words about like you. And they think it has to be this incredibly like meaningful, earth-shattering, and it's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And so there's just so much that goes into writing that essay and talking to students about that, about sort of the getting them like pumped up and excited to do it, but also sort of calming them down at the same time, and then giving them some strategies to write it.
Yeah, just keep it simple, right? Keep it simple. And that would be the thing. They'd write this major story. And I think, Jen, you and I talked about this of like, they played baseball their lives, and this one year they broke their arm and they had to sit on, and I was like, do you know how many I've read of these? So if I've read that many, the college admissions office has read a lot. So I like to also say, think about just a moment, a snapshot in your life And at the end of that, and create a narrative, tell a story, get creative. That's why I like the Disney idea, Gina, because it's like be imaginative about your life and think about a moment and how you could just write a narrative about it. And there was this one that I used to always use as a sample. I had a student who her junior year got to travel for the first time overseas, and it was a school trip, and they went to France. And so she wrote a snapshot for her essay was about going out to eat with some friends in Paris. And when they sat down, they saw escargot on the menu. And so they ordered, they all were like, no, I don't want to eat that. And she said, no, let's try it. So they ordered it, and she describes like what it looked like when it came to the table. And it was a little scary, right? But she tried it and didn't think it was bad. And so what was really neat about that, even though she didn't come up with this grand story, just in reading that little night that she had out, you were like, okay, she's open to traveling. She wants to learn about other cultures. She's willing to try new things, right? It was like all these things that you learned about this person in like the shortest little paragraph of a snippet of their night. And so I used to love to do that, to get kids to just think about, like you said, Jen, it doesn't have to be this grand gesture, this huge, it could be simple, just to let us get to know you a little bit.
A trick that I use also is if we do an activity where we say, if you were a superhero, who would you be and why? And have them put up on the board, and they have a great time with it. And then they have to present who's their superhero and why. And at the end of the exercise, I always say, why aren't you being that person? Are you being that person? How are you being that person? If you were a superhero, why aren't you being a superhero? And if you are being a superhero, tell us about it in one way. How are you like that character? How are you like Superman? How are you like a princess or whoever they may choose? And they come up with some really nice essays just from that.
I see Fred trying to figure out how he's like Tony Stark.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that. You know what though? That's such an interesting talking point in itself. Is I used to ask my students a similar question that goes back to that first year seminar course, and I asked them like, who is an example of a leader? Who's somebody you look up to? And I'm over the years, recent years especially, I'm seeing more and more students have a hard time answering that question. And I'm kind of wondering, are you noticing any odd trends? You're dealing with K through 12 teachers in this space here too, like where we're always talking about teaching to the test, where they're being formed always to be conditioned to give a specific answer. And then on the college entrance process now, they're being told, oh, no, we're going in the completely opposite direction now, and figure it out. And it's, I'm starting to think that it's got to be, you must be witnessing a weird disconnect with that kind of thinking that you're expecting, as opposed to what this is coming out of these systems in the United States. Are you?
Yeah, I mean, when I ask,
go ahead, Jen.
I was gonna say, when I ask questions like that, I get a lot of the students like talk about their family,
yeah,
and the people they admire are parents or family people, and they can just go on at length about that, and that's I wouldn't say that's a trend. I've seen that for a while, but I often get that answer, like my mom, and this is what she's done, or my dad, and this is what he does.
So I know that the one question that they would always pick a sports figure that would be popular, a family member, and I always would follow the family member up. If they would say their mother or their father, I would always give them the homework assignment of making sure when they go home that they tell them that. Yeah, because that's something that the parent could always benefit from hearing. It's a good way to express gratitude. So interesting. But in general, though, are you seeing this shaping, like for that type of an entrance? Like you're saying, you're moving away from the SAT, the ACT model of standardized assessment, and then you're going towards an open writing assignment, and then also evaluating their involvement in the community. Have you noticed in your time, you have so much great knowledge or experience and a nice timeline of experience, have you noticed any changes that are something that needs to be addressed differently?
Yeah, I'm not. So I just read like hundreds of applications in the past couple of weeks for the scholarship program, and I don't really notice that a lot in the students. I mean, it's there where you can tell, like, I am writing because this is the kind of story you want to hear. Like I've been told this is the kind of story I should be writing about. And it's got a flatness to it, where it's so hard to describe, but you know it when you read it, that the student probably could have told a much better story, or
Like a
could have
can.
told this in a different way, but someone sat down, or lots of people sat down with them and gave them this advice that sort of just kind of flattened out and kept it so it was more generic than it could have been.
It raises that interesting question about the SAT, like the prep. Like these people take courses, those that can afford it, right? They'll
Right.
spend 4, 5, 6 weeks preparing to take the SAT. And I said, are we looking for people that know how to take tests? Or are we looking for people that know how to think? Because if we're not looking for test takers, well, we're doing a good job. So, but we should be, and that's why I love hearing that the model is changing in higher ed. So.
Yeah, that's a big pet peeve of mine, because all the time and energy, the Saturdays that take to go to an SAT prep course, you could be strengthening your application in so many other ways. And it's taking all this energy and inspiration and dedication and all the time, and it's just wasting it on a test, whereas you could be focusing it on improving that student's application and just their own personal strength.
Yeah. Or for Pete's, point of view, they could be putting that into the portfolio, right? They could be creating, they could be drawing, they could be performing, they could be writing music, but, instead they're like, is it better to guess or is it better not to guess? Or, what's the square root of pi? Like, how do I figure that out? Like,
So piggybacking on that, then we get through the test, we get through the application, they're in there. Our listeners love lists. What are your 3 top tips on how to be successful in this wild, crazy world called college?
So in college or in the admissions process?
I think we're there already. What do you think, Aaron? Did we make it already? Are we in?
You're
We're
in.
in. How to survive once we're in, because that's where I messed up.
How to survive when you're in. Ask questions would be my first thing. Accept help and make connections. Find your people. I think those, and not necessarily in that order, but I think those are the key things. Find the people who are gonna love you for you, who you can get to know and grow with, and who are gonna appreciate your growth. Ask questions whenever you have questions of whoever is around you, because that's the way you find out who those people might be. And that's from the, sometimes I hesitated there. I almost said from the adults, but they're all adults.
Right.
From I'll say the older, wiser adults then at the college. I think those are the key things. And then accept support, go to tutoring, go right away before you even need it. Just go. Because the best students go to tutoring before they need it.
That's exactly right. That's what the pre-med majors do all the time. They sign up for that math tutor, the biology teacher, not when they're sinking, but before they get into the competition. I love that.
And this is not just college advice. This is life advice.
Life, yes.
You're out of college, you're in that job,
Great
and
point.
this is life and beyond. This is for everybody.
Absolutely.
This is for people teaching in an elementary school. This is for everybody.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I have my 3 tips. They're a little different than Jen's.
Good.
Okay.
Come on, Gina. Yeah.
Bring it on, Gina.
I see your tips and raise you.
Because I was this is 900 SAT person. I have a learning difference. I'm dyslexic, and it is just very difficult for me to perform on those things. So for me, it's the other end of the tips. So the first one would be realistic and humble, right? Be realistic with yourself. The second is go with your strengths. So many times students try to beat their weakness out of themselves, and instead they could be going with their strengths and going with what they're good at, rather than, constantly poking where they're not succeeding. And then the last one, which motivates a lot of people is, if not you, then who? If it's not you, then who? Who is more worthy than you? And there is nobody. So it's okay for you to be there. And those are the tips that get a lot of students through the college process, at least my mentors.
Those are great. We need to make some t-shirts out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Gina, you could have saved me at least 3 sessions with my therapist. All she had to say was, if not you, then who?
If not you, then who? Exactly.
I just had this conversation, 3 sessions worth, about that imposter syndrome sneaking up, showing its ugly little head. I should have just called Gina.
Well, you got Gina's number now, so.
I know, you can just play that on a loop.
Yes.
My son says it, he calls me because my son has my learning style and he's in college. And he thought he was going to start by being a physical therapist, and he's got my learning style. There was no way he was going to get through the math and science part of it. And so I had to help him walk through these steps. And now he calls me, okay, if not me, then who? I'm okay. I'm ready to be there. And I'm like, all right, that's good. That's good.
I love
That
it.
is awesome. Well, we have started something this season that I love, and that's we ask our guests, is there a teacher, a mentor, a coach, someone growing up that you looked up to, or you just want to shout out? They added that little spark that we see in both of you because you're both are amazing. So this is an opportunity for that. So Jen, I'm going to let you go first.
Gosh, there were so many, but since we're on the college talk, my parents were always like, you're going to college. It wasn't like if, it was where, right? But I didn't kind of believe it because they're your parents, and of course they have to say you're wonderful and fabulous. But I had an 11th grade English teacher, Miss Dvorak, and she brought to me these pamphlets from a school in New York, St. John's. I just totally remember it. And there's I forget what they called it, but it was like a great books program. And she also lent me like these 2 books that I'd never read. And said, like, I hope you're thinking of going to college. And that was just like someone else saying to me, like, you can do this. And I totally remember this. And this is, when was I graduated high school in 1981. Like, and I absolutely remember that. The name of the school, the pamphlet, the book she lent me. And because it was like somebody else believes in me.
That's
And I'm just going to add this. I've been reading all these nominations for the Torch Scholarship Program, and for you all and for anyone who's listening, like, one person can make such a huge impact on a student, because I read these nominations and I hear from the students about how a teacher or a mentor or a coach or someone in the community like just was kind to them or gave them, a push. Or an encouragement, and they're just like, wow, like someone else sees that I can do this. It's phenomenal. And so I shout out to Ms. Dvorak.
Good message. Thank you. How about you, Gina?
It would have to be Roger Sullivan, who was the principal of my high school. I went to a big public school in New York, and I used to get in trouble all the time. And so one day he pulled me into the principal's office, and I'm like, oh, wow, now I'm really in trouble. Like, I just was like, I don't even know what I did. I'm emptying my pockets and I'm trying to figure out, making sure there's no guilt on me whatsoever. And so I walk into the principal's office, and he opens the door, and we sit down, and he said, how are you? I'm like, what? What? I'm fine. How are you? And so he just started a relationship with me. He broke the taboo of going into the principal's office. And I would have a standing meeting with him, and we would shoot baskets with paper. We'd crumple up his paper and clean his office and shoot baskets with it and talk. And he was by far the most influential person in my academic life. And he went to all of my field hockey games and just showed me that an adult is not somebody who's necessarily you're not going to get in trouble from.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, those are two wonderful, heartwarming stories. Wow. Letitia, you okay over there?
Gina's making me cry.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it coming, girl. Okay, so here's the part. Letitia, try to keep it down to the simple notes where we tell you what we kind of took from this conversation, because that's why we're doing this. We like to learn from each other, right? We're collaborating, we're educators. So we're going to kind of each take turns, if that's okay with you, sharing a little spark or an idea or whatever, and then you as our guest kind of get the last word. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay. Fred, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. First of all, both, thank you, Jen, Gina. Like you're doing what I already said. You're doing really important work. It's so needed. There's a lot of little takeaways. I'm not going to take the low-hanging ones. I think that I'm watching all of you, right? Everyone reaches for their pen. They look down when they hear that key thing and all that. But actually, I'm going to go back to what you said, Jen, and I think this is
trying to
key.
hide it.
I think this is key. I think it's an ongoing theme, and it needs to be repeated, and it can occur at all levels of education, and that's the relationship building. The key is relationship building. Sorry, Pete. The key is relationship building. And and even just today, I was just thinking about an opportunity I had to sit down with a student at the end of a class and showing them how to do something on the computer. But I think that's where we all can be always improving, because really that's what all this comes down to. There was a quote, or someone had asked me, about what last spring they asked, what will the fall look like? We weren't still sure about COVID, but the one thing we were talking about is, being authentic. And I think if you're a teacher and you're authentic, you're going to be able to be a natural relationship builder. And that is what's needed in education. So I love that. I'm going to make that my t-shirt.
All right.
So there you go.
Good. How about you, Letitia?
I'm going to say it, and even if you think it was low-hanging fruit, I don't care, because I love we all have value, and our stories have the power to create transformational change. And that was just several thoughts. Yes, thank you, Jen.
That was a fruit smoothie. Very good, Letitia.
Funny.
How about you, Pete?
I'm gonna get. I've been thinking about tattoos a lot, and I'm gonna get Jen's list tattooed on this arm tomorrow. On this one.
Oh, full
I might
sleeve?
even have, if not you, then who, right here. But
You're awesome, man. You are
I'd love
awesome.
to do it. If I had the muscles on my arm, I'd do it.
Hardcore.
So hey, the keys anywhere are relationships and connections. Love it. And then the list blew me away. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes.
So Jen and Gina, I kind of wrote something down. I don't think it was anything specifically you said, but just kind of the theme of what you were kept saying you do for your students. And so what I wrote down is we need to tell our students to own your story. Own your story. So that's what
I'm writing that down. That is not low-hanging fruit.
All right.
No.
Add that to the smoothie. So Jen, do you have any last thoughts or anything from the conversation, or something you want to leave with us as we close down?
Blah, blah, blah.
Well said.
Well said. Yeah.
That's my t-shirt. It's gonna say blah, blah, blah. Hashtag. No. I mean, I am so lucky. I read all these applications, and then and sometimes I just want to open my door and I just want to yell out, like, you are all so amazing. And because I know they don't know it. So I feel like a lot of times my job is reminding students of how incredible they are.
Yeah.
And I think all educators probably, we do that a lot, right? It's like, you got this, you could do this. You could, you can set your heart on something. And if you're willing to work for it, like, you can get there if you're in the right direction. And so I don't know. So yeah, so I really like what I do. I really like that I get to do it with my college roommate. I just think it's so interesting. We're in the same field, right? And we come at it from different viewpoints and we have different strengths, but just working together, like, I hope we can reach a whole bunch of students, really.
That's
Actually
cool.
a whole bunch of families, because the whole college going is it's families there. it's not just a student, it's the whole family.
Great. And then real quickly, where can our listeners reach out to you if they want to connect and hear more about how they can support their students or what you're doing?
Yeah, so they can go to keystocollege.org, and they can find a link to contact me, to contact us, and they can find a whole lot of videos from students and our podcasts and everything. Or they can just email me. Probably the quickest way is to email me at jschoen, SCHOEN 12 @gmail.com. That's
Perfect.
probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Great. Thanks, Jen. And Gina, how about you? Any last words or final thoughts?
Two real fast. One would be, it's hard to do what we all do. And I give you all a lot of credit for making this podcast and having guests on. It's not easy, to face your vulnerabilities, what you're doing well, and maybe what you're learning from that. Learning gets personal sometimes. And I appreciate that you had us on. And then the other is, if there's a problem, fix it. And that's where Rise Together came from. As an educator, we got so frustrated with what we couldn't do with 250 students in our caseload. And that's where Rise Together came from. It's just, okay, that is very difficult. So what can I do now at my stage of life to fix that problem and be more solution oriented?
Love that.
Great.
I
And
love
where
that.
can people find you if they want to reach out, Gina?
It's Rise for Real Change at Gmail. So Rise and the number 4 Real Change at Gmail.
Perfect. Thank you. Pete, where can our listeners find us or continue the conversation?
Our website, teacherpeprally.com. We are on YouTube. Give us some likes, subscribe. Wherever you're listening to us tonight, we would love some reviews. Make sure you're subscribing. And then our hotline, 678-439-TPR1. Give us a call. Keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and tell us your college stories. Call and then tell us how college was
Wait,
for
hold
you.
it. Not you, Fred.
That's
changing
a
my
different
voice.
conversation.
Don't want any of those.
My college experience was
And let
awesome.
me tell you, I don't know, our guests, this is your first time here. We hope to have you back again, but
Absolutely.
friends, we have over 4,000 people who have been listening. So we appreciate you.
Wow.
We're so excited about how the collaboration, the conversation is growing. Fred, I don't know if you noticed, he waxed the gym floor. It's a little extra shiny, Jen, so careful as you're leaving.
Yep,
Pete added some more seats. And
Oh, yeah.
Letitia, her and I, we adjusted the lights to make sure that it was suitable for Fred's a diva. He's funny about when we're on camera and he's got to have a certain light on. So Letitia and I made
took
sure.
2 hours to get this hair ready for this show.
Seriously, we're so appreciative. And Gina and Jen, thank you so much for coming on. This was really a
Yes.
great conversation, and we learned a lot of keys to helping our students, especially first generation, to college.
Thanks.